In 1983, professional climber Dan Goodwin illegally climbed the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He said he was trying to bring attention to the inability to rescue trapped occupants of the upper levels of skyscrapers. In August of 2001, actor James Woods reported 4 suspicious men on his flight, but authorities didn't take his claims seriously. Turns out there were 4 of the hijackers who would go on to crash into the World Trade Center, and this was one of their test runs. Afghan resistance leader Ahmad Shamu Sood warned about a major terrorist attack that was about to happen on U.S. soil, but he ended up being assassinated just 2 days before 9/11. An FBI counterterrorism expert John O'Neill urged the federal government to take the threat of Al-Qaeda more seriously, but he was eventually pushed into early retirement due to disagreements with the Bureau. He went on to head security at the World Trade Center, where he was killed on 9/11. Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were both booked to fly on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. But Wahlberg decided last minute to fly to Toronto instead, while MacFarlane missed the flight by 10 minutes due to a hangover. Released in June of 2000, video game Deus Ex didn't include the World Trade Center in its skyline due to technical limitations. The in-game explanation was that they were destroyed in a terrorist attack. In August of 2000, the band Dream Theater recorded a live studio album called Live Scenes from New York. The album cover art features the New York City skyline with the Twin Towers on fire. Most disturbingly, the album was quickly pulled from shelves after coincidentally being released on September 11, 2001. Only one non-military plane was allowed to fly after all commercial flights were forced to land. It was delivering antivenom to a snake handler in Florida who was bitten by the highly venomous taipan snake. Sculptor Michael Richards was killed in his art studio on the 92nd floor of the North Tower on 9/11. His art ironically focused on planes, including a sculpture of airplanes piercing a cast of his own body. This iconic photograph of 28-year-old Marcy Borders covered in dust was taken just after the World Trade Center collapsed. Marcy was a bank teller who worked on the 81st floor of the North Tower. She survived the collapse but sadly died from cancer in 2014, likely caused by the toxic fumes she was exposed to. The only off-duty NYPD officer who was killed in 9/11 had signed his retirement papers that morning, but instead of leaving his badge, John William Perry decided to pick it up one last time. Here's a photo of Pork Chop the search dog receiving fluids and comfort before returning to his duties. Many 9/11 rescue dogs were becoming depressed because they weren't finding any live bodies. Rescue workers had to constantly bury themselves to trick the dogs into thinking they were actually saving someone. Tanya Head was a well-known 9/11 survivor who faked being in the South Tower during the attacks. She served as president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network for years until it was revealed she wasn't even in the country on 9/11. Known as the Meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together after the towers collapsed. It's not known if there are any human remains inside. Long after the cleanup, body parts were still being recovered. In 2006, the arm of a victim was found on the roof of a nearby bank. And as recently as 2013, fragments of human remains were discovered on top of a Manhattan rooftop more than a decade after the attacks. In 2002, a 15-year-old boy became inspired by the terrorist attacks on 9/11. He decided to steal an airplane and fly it into a building in Tampa, Florida. It ended up only damaging one office room, and he was the only person that died. Since 9/11, more than 40,000 people have been diagnosed with cancers and chronic illnesses linked to the toxic dust released when the towers collapsed, a debris cloud made up of pulverized concrete, asbestos, fuel, and materials from office equipment and lighting systems. More first responders have died from 9/11-related illnesses than on the actual day of 9/11. Even nearly 25 years after the attacks, victims of 9/11 are still being identified. In 2025, 3 more people were named through advanced DNA testing using tiny fragments recovered from the World Trade Center site. But of the 2,977 victims, 1,100 of them still have no identified remains. In 2015, actor Steve Rannazzisi, best known for playing Kevin on The League, publicly admitted that he had lied for more than a decade about surviving the 9/11 attacks. He had repeatedly claimed he was working on a high floor at the World Trade Center and narrowly escaped when the planes hit. But after journalists discovered that Merrill Lynch had no offices in the towers and that Rannazzisi was never there, the actor confessed the story was fabricated and that he was actually in Midtown Manhattan. The admission sparked widespread backlash for obvious reasons, with many accusing him of exploiting a national tragedy and the trauma of real survivors, permanently damaging his reputation. Here's a video demonstrating the potency of the venom from a Russell's viper. Russell's vipers are among the most venomous snakes in the world, responsible for tens of thousands of serious bites each year across Southeast Asia. Their venom contains enzymes that aggressively activate the blood's clotting factors, forcing clots to form through the bloodstream. Here's what that looks like in human blood. These abnormal clots can block blood flow to vital organs, increasing the risk of strokes and heart attacks. As clotting factors are rapidly exhausted, the blood loses its ability to clot where it's needed, intentionally leading to internal bleeding, shock, and organ failure. In 2023, an 18-year-old mother from Miami named Jasmine Paez was arrested after trying to hire a hitman to kill her 3-year-old son using a parody website called Rent a Hitman. Police say she filled out an online request form, uploaded a photo of her child, provided her address, and asked that the job be completed by the end of the week. In the message, she wrote that she wanted to get something done once and for all, and requested that her son be taken far, far away and possibly be killed. When investigators asked why she wanted her own son dead, Paez gave no real motive, only that she was overwhelmed and no longer wanted the responsibility of being a mother. The website's owner originally created Rent a Hitman as a joke, but after receiving hundreds of murder-for-hire requests over the years leading to multiple arrests, he now works closely with law enforcement and immediately reported Paez's request. Undercover officers posed as a hitman and arranged a meeting, where Paez allegedly confirmed she wanted the child dead. She was arrested and charged with solicitation to commit murder, and the boy was placed into protective custody unharmed. Here's a friendly reminder of why you should always lock your doors no matter what. This disturbing ring camera footage shows a disheveled woman wearing a white dress wandering through a residential stairway in the middle of the night while holding a knife in her mouth. She paces back and forth, systematically trying apartment doors, stopping at each one to see if it's unlocked. When she realizes they're locked, she bends down and checks under the doormats, clearly searching for hidden spare keys before moving on to the next door. She even stares directly into the camera while moving from door to door, seemingly unaware or unconcerned by how terrifying she looks. Still armed, she walks up the stairs to another floor and continues scanning hallways, before reportedly lingering outside more apartments as the video cuts off. Her appearance, combined with the fact that she was half-dressed and carrying a knife in her mouth, made many people fear that she wasn't simply trespassing, but was potentially on drugs or mentally ill while actively looking for someone to hurt, showing how close a single unlocked door can come to turning into something far worse. When Tupac Shakur was shot and killed at the age of 25 in September of 1996, his longtime rival, the notorious B.I.G., was reportedly devastated. Despite their very public feud, multiple people close to Biggie said he cried when he heard the news and appeared genuinely shaken, telling friends, "Shit got effed up somewhere along the way, but that was my end." The two had once been close friends, but everything changed in 1994, when Tupac was robbed and shot 5 times at a New York recording studio. Tupac believed people close to Biggie knew about the attack, especially after Biggie released the song "Who Shot Ya" soon afterward. Biggie insisted he had nothing to do with it and said the song had been recorded long before the shooting, but the damage was done. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry, fueled by diss tracks, media pressure, and growing paranoia about being shot, turned them into bitter enemies. But behind the scenes, Biggie reportedly feared the violence had gone too far and worried he might be next. 6 months later, Biggie was shot and killed in Los Angeles by a drive-by shooting at the young age of 24. Both murders still remain unsolved to this day, turning one of hip-hop's most famous rivalries into one of its darkest tragedies. This was the moment a military wife was caught on camera trying to poison her husband. In 2023 in Tucson, Arizona, Melody Feliciano Johnson repeatedly poured bleach into the coffee maker of her U.S. Air Force husband during a bitter divorce. When his coffee began tasting strange and making him feel nauseous, he first assumed the machine had mold before testing it with pool strips, which showed dangerously high levels of chlorine. Suspecting he was being poisoned, he set up hidden cameras in their kitchen, which later recorded his wife adding bleach to the coffee reservoir. Although he avoided serious injury or death by pretending to drink the coffee, investigators said he believed she was trying to kill him to collect his life insurance benefits. She later took a plea deal and was sentenced to probation, mental health treatment, and a no-contact order. These are the graves believed to belong to the 63 wives of Indian General Afzal Khan dating back to 1659. Historical accounts suggest an astrologer predicted the general would die in his next battle, and fearing that his wives would remarry after his death, he ordered all 63 of them to be executed before leaving for war. Soon afterward, Khan was killed in battle just as the prophecy foretold. Today, the cemetery still stands in Afzalpura, India, a site tied to one of the darkest stories associated with honor, power, and possession in Indian history. This was the moment a 7-Eleven was destroyed during a brazen Christmas Eve ATM theft in Texas. In the early morning hours of December 24, 2025, surveillance footage from a 7-Eleven near Fort Worth shows two suspects smashing through the front of the store, attaching a cable to the ATM and using a stolen SUV to violently rip the machine through the building. After destroying half the store, the suspects fled, abandoning the ATM and SUV nearby and still remain unidentified. There's a tree in Pakistan that's been chained and officially arrested since 1898. This happened when a drunk British officer thought the tree was moving towards him and ordered one of his men to arrest it. 3 Nigerian men were arrested at Oran International Airport in Algeria after trying to fly to Dubai disguised as Arab women. Wrapped in hijabs, niqabs, and heavy makeup, they tried to slip through security, but officers noticed their documents didn't match and spotted stubble beneath the veils. A quick secondary check exposed the trio immediately, and they were taken into custody on the spot. In May of 2024, Jack Joseph Ball murdered his 30-year-old pregnant sister Bethany Ann Israel during what was supposed to be a family dinner at his Lakeville, Minnesota home. She was approximately 18 weeks pregnant. When she stopped responding later that night, their mother went to the house and discovered large amounts of blood, prompting a 911 call. Police found an exceptionally violent scene inside the home, including a pool of blood in the kitchen, blood spattered on cabinets, a saw, a hatchet, and dismembered body parts. Investigators said Ball had scattered her remains, including placing a body part on a neighbor's front step. He fled the scene but was later found hiding in a nearby backyard with a self-inflicted knife wound to his neck. Handwritten journals recovered from the residence revealed Ball's fixation on his sister's pregnancy, stating he was angry because she lost her virginity and was therefore no longer innocent. The medical examiner ruled her death as complex homicidal violence. Ball has pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder of his sister and her unborn child. In 2021, Mexican rapper Dan Sur went viral after revealing he had surgically implanted gold chains into his scalp to replace his hair. He claimed doctors inserted medical hooks directly into his skull so the chains would permanently hang from his head, calling it gold hair. Plastic surgeons who saw the videos warned the procedure was extremely dangerous, with high risks of infection, scarring, and damage to the skull, and said that no reputable clinic would ever perform it. In 2020, a nurse named Donna Montecone, while working at Yale University's fertility center, secretly stole fentanyl from at least 175 vials intended for women undergoing egg retrieval procedures. Over a 5-month period, she replaced the powerful opioid with saline to conceal the theft, leaving patients to endure the invasive procedure with little or no pain relief. Several women later described the pain as torturous and traumatic, including at least one patient who underwent 8 retrievals while fully awake. When patients questioned the severity of the pain, Montecone allegedly assured them it was normal, delaying detection of the abuse. Investigators later determined she was diverting the fentanyl to support her own opioid addiction. She was arrested in 2020, pleaded guilty to drug tampering charges, and was later sentenced to federal prison. Here's a police sketch that was released during the investigation into the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeline McCann, a case that remains unsolved nearly 2 decades later. In 2007, Madeline vanished from a holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal, while her parents were dining nearby. She'd been left asleep with her younger siblings, and when her mother went to check on the children later that night, Madeline's bed was empty and the bedroom window was open. As the investigation dragged on, police issued multiple suspect sketches based on eyewitness accounts, including one female person of interest that later drew widespread attention due to its striking resemblance to Ghislaine Maxwell, the British former socialite who was convicted in 2021 of trafficking girls for Jeffrey Epstein. Despite one of the largest missing child investigations in European history, no definitive trace of Madeline has ever been found, as her fate remains unknown. Dan Burroughs was a high-ranking white supremacist in the 1960s, serving as the 3rd highest member of the American Nazi Party and a Grand Dragon of the New York KKK. But in 1965, the New York Times revealed that Burroughs was actually Jewish, raised in a Jewish family, attended Hebrew school, and even had a bar mitzvah. Hours after the article was published, Burroughs took his own life, and the organizations he led immediately disavowed him as the revelation became public. Daisy Coleman grew up in a family marked by repeated tragedy. In 2009, her father was killed when their car slipped on black ice and plunged into a ravine in Missouri. In 2012, at age 14, Daisy was sexually assaulted while incapacitated and left outside her home in freezing temperatures. Despite hospital records documenting injuries and extreme intoxication, the charges were later dropped, and she was publicly discredited, triggering years of vicious harassment. In 2013, the family's home burned down under mysterious circumstances, and in 2018, Daisy's younger brother Tristan died in a car crash, mirroring their father's death. By 2020, Daisy was struggling with severe PTSD, harassment, a reported stalker, and learning she couldn't have children, a condition doctors said may have been linked to the assault. Under the weight of it all, she took her own life that August at the young age of 23. 4 months later, her mother Melinda also died by suicide. Daisy's story was documented in Audrey and Daisy, released while she was still trying to rebuild her life. In 2022, DMV rapper Markel Moro, aka Gunu, was shot and killed in Washington, D.C. Days later, his family held a memorial inside a D.C. nightclub where his embalmed body was dressed in designer clothes, propped upright on stage, and displayed while his music played to a crowd. The invite-only event was attended by family, friends, and fans, turning a nightclub into a viewing space and leaving people standing feet away from his real corpse. There's no evidence Gunu ever requested this, making it one of the strangest memorials ever held for a deceased rapper. A baby named Breland was born completely healthy, but just 2 days after birth, she was kissed on the mouth by someone with an active cold sore. Because her immune system was not yet developed, she contracted herpes simplex virus, which spread to her brain and caused HSV encephalitis. The infection led to seizures and permanent brain damage, another case demonstrating why you should be very careful when kissing a baby. In 1925, Ora Ralph Thomas, an Illinois sheriff's deputy during the Prohibition era, was assassinated by members of the KKK. Thomas was the leader of an armed anti-Klan paramilitary group, making him a direct target. When 3 Klansmen ambushed him, Thomas returned fire, shooting and killing all 3 of his attackers before succumbing to his own wounds. In November of 2020, Zhang Bo and his girlfriend Yi Cheng-chen murdered Zhang's 2 young children by throwing them from a 15th-floor apartment in Chongqing. Investigators eventually determined the killings were planned. Yi reportedly viewed the children as obstacles to her future with Zhang, while Zhang disabled surveillance cameras and waited until neighbors were unlikely to notice before carrying out the horrific act. After the deaths, he attempted to portray the incident as an accident, even returning to the scene and showing visible grief. Medical examiners confirmed both children died from multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a high-rise fall. Chinese courts described the crime as extremely cruel and noted the betrayal of parental duty as an aggravating factor. Both defendants were sentenced to death in 2021, appeals were rejected, and the sentences were approved by China's Supreme People's Court. The executions were carried out in January of 2024. This innocent-looking photo was one of the last selfies taken of Chris Kremers and Lee Sanfroon on April 1, 2014, shortly before they vanished while hiking the El Pianista Trail in Panama. The photo was taken near the trail's end, where hikers are supposed to turn back, but for some reason, the two continued deeper into the jungle instead. In the days that followed, Froon's phone was repeatedly powered off and on as emergency calls were attempted. On the night of April 8th, her camera captured over 90 flash photos in total darkness. Among them is a disturbing close-up believed to show the back of Kremers' head with strands of hair lit up by the flash. It's unknown if either woman was alive by the time these photos were taken. Months later, their backpacks and skeletal remains were found scattered along the jungle, and the exact circumstances of their deaths remain unknown. In 2017, Brooke Preston was brutally killed inside her home by her longtime friend and roommate Randy Herman Jr. after he stabbed her 25 times. Herman admitted he carried out the attack but claimed he was sleepwalking and had no memory of killing her. Investigators found no medical or behavioral evidence to support a sleepwalking episode, and prosecutors argued the number, placement, and force of the wounds showed conscious intent. The sleepwalking defense was ultimately rejected by the jury, who convicted Herman and sentenced him to prison for the rest of his life. Tara Calico was a 19-year-old University of New Mexico student who disappeared on September 20th, 1988 while riding her bike near her home in Belen, New Mexico. She never returned, and no physical evidence of her fate was ever found. 3 months after she went missing, a Polaroid was discovered in a Florida parking lot, showing a young woman and a boy bound and gagged inside a van. Tara's family believed the woman closely resembled her, noting similar facial features and a scar consistent with Tara's medical history. But the photo was never definitively identified or traced to its source. Tara Calico was never found, the boy in the photo was never identified, and no arrests were ever made. In 2023, Delbert Cornish shot and killed his 18-year-old daughter, Hope Onyx Cornish, inside their home in Caldwell, Idaho. After killing her, he also shot and killed her pet cat. Cornish later admitted to the killings, telling police, "My kids died by my hand." At the time of her death, Hope had reportedly been turning her life around. Family members said she'd been sober for more than a year, was working, and had recently started building more stability in her life. But despite this, Cornish told investigators he killed her and her cat because he was, quote, "tired of them being made fun of." Authorities found no evidence of provocation or self-defense and said the killing was deliberate. Cornish later pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison.
Well, this is my last video. It all has to come to this. Tomorrow is the day of retribution. The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you.
That was the final video recorded by 22-year-old Santa Barbara College student Elliot Rodger just one day before he carried out a mass killing in Isla Vista, California. On May 23, 2014, the incel began what he called his day of retribution after years of documenting his anger toward women and sexually active men who he constantly blamed for his loneliness and rejection. In the weeks before the attack, he stockpiled firearms, ammunition, and knives and prepared a 137-page manifesto titled My Twisted World, outlining his grievances and violent intentions.
I don't know why you girls are so repulsed by me. It doesn't make sense. I'm sophisticated. I'm magnificent. I'm the ultimate gentleman. These sunglasses here were $300. Giorgio Armani. So I'll put them on. See?
On the day of the attack, he first stabbed 3 male roommates to death inside his apartment, locking their bodies behind a door to delay discovery. Elliot then drove to a nearby sorority house intending to kill women but was unable to gain entry. Instead, he shot and killed 2 women outside before continuing through Isla Vista, shooting at random pedestrians and vehicles. After a brief shootout with police, Elliot crashed his car and was found dead inside from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. 6 people were killed and 14 others were injured. Authorities later confirmed Elliot had been reported to police weeks earlier for disturbing behavior, but no weapons were confiscated. His recorded videos and manifesto continue to circulate online more than a decade after the senseless killings. That was Michael Jackson on a recorded phone call from 2009, speaking to his former manager Dieter Wiesner just months before his sudden death. Jackson sounds panicked and overwhelmed, telling Wiesner there's a group of people who want to get rid of him. He warns that what he's dealing with is bigger than the government, but never names anyone or explains what he believes they want from him. Many believe the disturbing call is AI generated, but it's not. The call has circulated online for years, long before modern voice cloning tools existed. The audio has resurfaced heavily online in recent days, especially after the newly released Epstein files. Among the materials circulating are photographs showing Michael Jackson and Jeffrey Epstein together, which has led many to re-examine old footage, interviews, and audio recordings from Michael's final years. While the phone call itself doesn't mention Epstein or make any specific accusations, its timing and tone have caused renewed speculation about what Jackson believed was about to happen to him. Michael died just a few months after making that phone call on June 25, 2009. Authorities ruled his death the result of acute propofol intoxication caused by medical negligence, as his doctor would essentially give him anesthesia to put him to sleep every night. Dr. Conrad Murray was eventually convicted of involuntary manslaughter, and the case was closed, as no evidence ever confirmed the threat Jackson believed he was facing. Eminem was stalked by the same man who broke into his properties 3 times over 6 years, repeatedly reaching him despite arrests and court orders. In 2019, the stalker broke into one of Eminem's former homes and told the new homeowner, he was looking for his brother Marshall. In 2020, he escalated by entering Eminem's actual residence through an unlocked entry point while Eminem was asleep, later telling police he was there to kill him. After being arrested and convicted, the man returned again in 2024, once more breaching Eminem's property. Court records show the break-ins weren't the result of sophisticated planning, but repeated exploitation of access points and timing, highlighting how even high-level security measures can fail against persistent obsession. Eminem was unharmed, but prosecutors described the pattern as escalating and dangerous. A mummified carrier pigeon found inside a UK chimney in 1982 was carrying an encrypted World War II message from 1944 that's never been decoded. The pigeon likely died mid-mission during Britain's wartime communications and remained sealed in the chimney for nearly 40 years. Attached to its leg was a capsule holding a coded strip of letters and numbers believed to be connected to D-Day operations. Despite repeated attempts by historians and codebreakers, the message's meaning and destination remain unknown. Britain's intelligence agency GCHQ has confirmed the cipher is still unsolved and publicly asked for help deciphering it, leaving whatever information the pigeon was carrying permanently undelivered. This was the moment TikToker Hannah Viverette was filming a dance video inside her second-floor apartment in Hagerstown, Maryland, when a man suddenly climbed onto her balcony and entered through the door. Hannah later said she recognized him as someone she'd seen watching her from a truck outside her building on multiple occasions. She also said she was terrified because the man kept his hands in his hoodie, making her fear he was holding a weapon. She acted correctly by running into the hallway and yelling loudly to draw attention, which luckily appeared to scare the intruder off. A neighbor then led her inside their apartment where she was able to call police. Police identified the suspect as 36-year-old Angel Moises Rodriguez Gomez, who was charged with burglary and stalking. He was later released on bond and taken into ICE custody.
So I got my katana.
It doesn't get easier to watch. Oh, that's a tough watch. That was when Twitch streamer Biscuit suffered a sudden severe injury live on stream after her katana slipped from its sheath. As the blade fell toward the floor, she instinctively tried to grab it, and it sliced into her hand, severing 2 tendons. She ended the stream almost immediately as she was taken to the emergency room.
I need to cut stream. I have to go to ER. I think I f***ed my fingers.
Hours later, the streamer posted an update from the hospital showing her arm heavily bandaged and immobilized. Tendon damage often requires surgery and long rehabilitation, with no guarantee of full strength or mobility ever returning. Juan Fernando Hermosa is considered the youngest serial killer in Ecuadorian history. Between 1991 and 1992, Hermosa murdered at least 22 people when he was just 15 years old, targeting taxi drivers and stealing their vehicles. But because he was a minor at the time of the killing, Ecuadorian law capped his sentence at 4 years regardless of the number of victims, and Hermosa was released after serving the maximum juvenile sentence. Almost immediately after his release, he was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered as an act of vigilante revenge connected to his heinous crimes. In 2008, Vince Lee boarded a Greyhound bus in Manitoba, Canada, moved seats after a stop, and sat beside 22-year-old Tim McLean, who was asleep against a window with his headphones on. Lee suddenly attacked him with a large knife, stabbing him more than 60 times in the neck, chest, and shoulders, as passengers heard blood-curdling screams and fled the bus in horror. The situation turned into an hours-long standoff, while police waited outside and terrified witnesses watched from a distance. During that time, Lee decapitated McLean, held up his severed head by the hair, and displayed it through the bus window to those outside like a trophy. He then returned to the body, severed other parts, mutilated it further, and consumed portions of McLean's flesh, including reportedly eating his eyes and part of his heart while blood dripped everywhere. Later on, McLean's ear, nose, and tongue were found in Lee's pocket. He was eventually taken into custody and later found not criminally responsible due to untreated schizophrenia. He spent years in a psychiatric facility and was released under supervision, making it one of the most infamous and controversial cases in the history of Canada. Here's a video showing exactly what not to do during a grease fire. I don't know if this is a moment of true horror or true stupidity.
Turn it off! Turn it, what the fuck? What do I do? Bro, turn it off! Turn it off! Tanner, hurry up! Tanner, turn it off! Tanner, turn it off! I don't know what to do! Grab! Grab! Turn it off! Grab the Tanner! Grab it! Tanner! What? Oh my god, Tanner! What is it? Tanner! What is it? Oh my god, Tanner! Tanner! I don't know what it is! It's grab this! Tanner!
Instead of standing around like deer in headlights while the fire kept growing, the solution here was actually pretty simple. The obvious first move should have been turning the burner off immediately. As long as the heat stays on, the flames keep feeding. Immediately after that, they should have grabbed a larger pot, a metal lid, or even a baking tray and covered the pan completely. No oxygen means no fire. You don't throw water on it, you don't move it, and you definitely don't dump it across the kitchen. What ends up happening works out purely by luck, not because it was smart. Dumping a burning pan can spread flaming oil everywhere. And that's usually how small kitchen fires turn into house fires. Grease fires look chaotic, but the solution is simple. Kill the heat, cover it, leave it alone. In 1993, Sicilian mafia boss Giovanni Brusca ordered the kidnapping of 12-year-old Giuseppe Di Matteo to silence his father, a former mob insider who had begun cooperating with authorities. Disguised as police, captors lured the boy away, promising to reunite him with his dad. He was held for 779 days in degrading conditions, often caged, beaten, underfed, and moved between hideouts, while photos of his suffering were sent to pressure his father into silence. When testimony continued, Brusca ordered the kill, dismissing the boy as the puppy. Giuseppe was strangled and his body dissolved in acid to erase all evidence. The murder shocked Italy because it shattered the long-promoted myth that the mafia followed a code of honor that spared all children. But investigators in later trials revealed that this was never truly a rule, and Giuseppe's death became one of the most disturbing symbols of the mafia's retaliation tactics during the 1990s crackdowns. In 2019, police uncovered an abuse case at the Danby House nursing home in North Carolina after staff were caught recording and encouraging violent confrontations between elderly residents with dementia. Investigators said workers laughed, filmed, and allegedly urged a 73-year-old man to attack a 70-year-old woman, shouting instructions like punch her in the face while she cried for help. Both residents required constant care and couldn't fully understand what was happening, turning a supervised environment into exploitation for entertainment. The footage led to criminal charges and renewed scrutiny over how vulnerable patients in long-term care facilities can be manipulated by caregivers. Futoshi Matsunaga was a Japanese serial killer who turned psychological control into a weapon, forcing victims to torture and even murder their own family members through threats, isolation, and extreme brainwashing. Operating in the late 1990s, he targeted vulnerable households, took control of their finances, and used staged punishments to break people mentally until they obeyed him out of fear. Investigators later revealed that several killings were carried out by victims themselves after prolonged coercion, creating a chain of violence where family members as young as 5 years old were forced to turn on each other. Several bodies were dismembered and destroyed to erase evidence, leaving little physical trace until a survivor escaped and alerted police. Matsunaga ended up being sentenced to death in 2005, and the case remains one of Japan's most extreme examples of serial manipulation. That was when 25-year-old Erica Mae Butts was hyperventilating in court after receiving a life sentence for the death of 3-year-old Serenity Richardson in 2011. Prosecutors said the girl was repeatedly abused inside a South Carolina home, including being struck with a belt several times after wetting herself. When she was finally taken to the hospital, doctors documented extreme bruising and severe injuries across her body, and she later died from the trauma. Serenity had been left in Erica's care while her mother was trying to relocate. Another woman living in the home, Shanita Latrice Cunningham, was also charged in the case. Both women entered guilty pleas to homicide by child abuse and were sentenced to life in prison. They responded by collapsing in the courtroom, making a scene and crying hysterically before being dragged out. In 2006, comedian Bill Maher sparked backlash after attending a Halloween party dressed as Steve Irwin, wearing a khaki outfit with a fake stingray barb through his chest just weeks after Irwin's real-life death. Irwin had died that September while filming a documentary when a stingray's barb pierced his heart, making the costume feel especially raw to fans and the public. Maher later defended it as dark humor, arguing that risk comes with working around wild animals, but critics called it disrespectful and too soon, turning the outfit into one of the most controversial celebrity costumes of the era. A 49-year-old man in Romania caused a devastating accident in 2016 while cutting firewood with a neighbor after the two had reportedly been drinking together. Authorities said he mishandled a running chainsaw during what witnesses described as joking around, striking the 53-year-old victim directly in the groin. The man was rushed into emergency surgery with catastrophic injuries, but doctors were unable to save his floppy Johnson. Investigators treated the incident as a reckless accident rather than an intentional attack, a grim reminder of how alcohol and dangerous objects can quickly turn a fun night into a life-altering tragedy. 24-year-old Bulgarian influencer Andrea Ivanova drew global attention after reportedly spending more than $49,000 on repeated lip filler procedures in pursuit of extreme cosmetic changes. She's publicly shared complications following treatments, including severe swelling, discomfort, and being unable to fully close her mouth. Doctors warn that excessive filler can stretch tissue, increase infection risk, and permanently alter normal facial function. In 2018, a 34-year-old man in Hunan, China attempted to fake his own death by sending his car into a river as part of an insurance fraud scheme meant to send his family a payout of about $145,000. But fully believing her husband had truly died, his wife later drowned their two children before taking her own life. Authorities said she had no knowledge of the plan and had been under severe emotional and financial stress, including heavy medical expenses tied to a child's epilepsy treatment. The man resurfaced days later and turned himself into police, telling investigators the scheme was driven by debt, turning what began as a fraud attempt into a fatal chain of unintended consequences. 23-year-old Arizona man Christopher Todd Eric died following a mental health crisis and was mistakenly recorded as unclaimed due to a clerical error, according to his family's allegations. Years later, his mother said she recognized his preserved body inside a public anatomical exhibit, where it had been plastinated and displayed without her knowledge or consent. She's since pursued legal action seeking to recover his remains and challenge how unclaimed bodies are processed, sparking debate over consent, medical displays, and the ethical handling of human remains. A Connecticut man survived a horrific workplace accident after his arm became trapped inside an industrial furnace for 3 days. As circulation failed and tissue began to decay, he reportedly tried to amputate his own arm using a saw blade after noticing the smell of rotting flesh, but he lost consciousness from pain before he was able to finish. Concerned when he failed to show up for work, a friend contacted authorities, and rescuers eventually freed him, preventing a more than likely fatal outcome. In December of 1988, Hollywood cameraman Bob Samuels, whose credits included Short Circuit, The Color Purple, and Beverly Hills Cop 2, was found shot to death in his Northridge home, killed through a pillow used as a crude silencer. Investigators later accused his estranged wife, Mary Ellen Samuels, of arranging the murder to collect a $500,000 life insurance payout. Afterwards, she was said to have spent lavishly, including a Cancun trip where photos surfaced of her posing nude with large amounts of cash. Prosecutors also alleged that when the hired gunman began cooperating with authorities, she arranged for him to be strangled before he could testify. She was ultimately convicted for her role in the conspiracy and sentenced to life in prison. In August of 1993, 6 Kazakhstani hikers died during a trek through Siberia's Kamar-Daban mountain range. The only survivor later told investigators that members of the group suddenly began screaming, bleeding from their eyes and ears, foaming at the mouth, and clawing at their throats before collapsing one by one on the mountainside. Official reports ultimately ruled most of the deaths as hypothermia, with the group leader reportedly dying from a heart attack. But the survivors' description of the final moments has kept the incident controversial, with theories ranging from altitude sickness and poisoning to extreme weather exposure. Florida high school principal Dr. George Kenney built a devoted following by hypnotizing students to boost confidence and performance despite not being licensed. But in 2011, 3 teens he had worked with died within months of each other, 1 in a car crash and 2 by suicide, raising alarm from families who believed the hypnosis may have caused psychological harm. Investigators never proved a direct link to the deaths, but Kenney was charged with practicing hypnosis without a license, pleaded no contest, and resigned in 2012. Lawsuits from the victims' families ended in settlements, while Kenney quietly left Florida and withdrew from public life, leaving the controversy unresolved. John C. Woods, the U.S. Army hangman who carried out the executions of Nazis at the Nuremberg trials, completely lied about his qualifications to get the job, claiming prior experience as an executioner when none of it could later be verified. As a result of his incompetence, several condemned Nazi officials did not die from a clean neck break, which is the intended outcome of a properly calculated drop. Instead, multiple prisoners slowly strangled in agony, some taking up to 20 minutes to die while witnesses observed visible suffering. Despite complaints from observers, Woods continued performing executions and was never formally disciplined for the botched hangings. Between 2014 and 2015, Ohio woman Brittany Pilkington was responsible for the deaths of 3 of her children, all infant sons, over a 13-month span. The first child's death was initially ruled a case of SIDS, but suspicions grew after a second infant died under similar circumstances. Doctors briefly considered a possible genetic condition, and despite investigations, the youngest boy was returned home only to also die a few days later. One of her children, the only daughter, was never harmed. In police questioning, Brittany confessed to deliberately smothering all 3. She described restraining the older one by holding his legs during the struggle until he went limp after a few minutes. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a long history of trauma surrounding the family. Brittany was repeatedly beaten by her biological father as a child, and even worse, her husband was her former stepfather, whom she said had groomed and sexually abused her starting at the age of 9 before she eventually married him as a teenager. In 2018, she pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jordan James Park, the British influencer known as the Lip King, has died at age 34 after a suspected complication linked to a cosmetic procedure. Park gained notoriety for spending more than $150,000 on surgeries and even appeared on the reality show Botched, where doctors warned him about the risks tied to extreme fillers and repeated operations. Police are currently treating his death as unexplained, while a man and woman were arrested on suspicion of manslaughter as the investigation continues. The case has quickly sparked renewed discussion about the dangers of unregulated cosmetic work and the overwhelming pressure created by online beauty trends. In October of 2011, 2-year-old Wang Yu wandered into a market street in Foshan, China, where she was struck by a van and left critically injured in the road. Surveillance footage later showed dozens of pedestrians and drivers passing by without intervening before a second truck ran her over. After several minutes, a female waste collector finally moved her to safety, but the child tragically died a few hours later from her injuries. The case sparked worldwide debate about bystander behavior, public responsibility, and the social pressures that may discourage people from intervening in emergencies. This was the moment an airport security worker in the Philippines swallowed $300 in cash to avoid being arrested. The money had allegedly been taken from a passenger's bag during a routine screening, and when the traveler reported it missing, airport staff confronted the employee as cameras were rolling. Her bizarre attempt to hide the evidence quickly went viral online, prompting officials to suspend her from duty while an investigation moved forward. Here's the before and after of an imperial crown left mangled following the 2025 Louvre heist, where thieves forced it through a narrow slit cut into its reinforced display case, crushing the delicate gold frame as they pulled it free. During the escape, the damaged crown was dropped just outside of the museum and quickly recovered by authorities, though it had been badly deformed from being forced out and striking the ground. The Louvre has since formed a restoration committee and begun seeking proposals to fix it, with early estimates starting around $50,000, though officials say the real cost will come from the painstaking hours of delicate repair needed to rebuild the 170-year-old piece. In 2018, Thomas Perez Jr. called police in Fontana, California to report his 71-year-old father missing after he failed to return home from a short walk with the family dog. But instead of finding his father, Perez Jr. became the focus of a 17-hour interrogation where detectives insisted he had killed him, repeatedly claiming they'd found blood, a body, and evidence that didn't actually exist. Exhausted, denied medication, and pushed into severe mental distress, he eventually gave a false confession, only for officers to learn moments later that his father was alive at LAX preparing to visit family. Despite knowing the truth, detectives reportedly left Perez Jr. alone in the interrogation room for another hour, during which he attempted suicide before being sent to a psychiatric hospital. In 2023, a federal judge ruled the tactics unconstitutional, saying he'd been worn down and pressured while clearly compromised, and the city later settled the case for $900,000 while denying any wrongdoing. Here's a photo of Daniel Pearl during his captivity in 2002, after the Wall Street Journal reporter was kidnapped in Pakistan while investigating extremist networks. Pearl was held by militants linked to Al-Qaeda, and investigators later concluded he was murdered by Khalil Sheikh Mohammed, the architect of the 9/11 attacks. After weeks in captivity, a video surfaced showing Pearl forced to read statements on camera before he was beheaded, with the footage circulating online as extremist propaganda. The killing drew worldwide outrage, not only for its brutality, but because Pearl had been abducted while simply pursuing a journalism assignment. Here's a body cam still of Tiffany Taylor speaking with police after she escaped an encounter with New Jersey serial killer Khalil Wheeler Weaver in 2016. Taylor told officers that he targeted black sex workers because he believed their disappearances would draw less attention, but her report was not fully acted on at the time. Prosecutors later said Wheeler Weaver continued killing, targeting vulnerable women he met online. Frustrated by the lack of progress, friends of one victim carried out their own social media investigation, eventually helping link him to multiple cases. The information ultimately contributed to his arrest, and he was later convicted of several murders and sentenced to life in prison. New fear unlocked. During flash flooding in Omaha, Nebraska in 2021, several people became trapped inside a stalled elevator which was descending toward a lower level that was already completely flooded. After water rushed into the cabin and rose toward their necks, someone called 911 while warning that they may not survive if help didn't arrive in time. Rescuers eventually forced the doors open and pulled them out. Despite the traumatic experience, all of them survived and no one was seriously injured. This was the moment a Brazilian journalist was electrocuted on live TV. In 1996, Lazier Martins was reporting from the Festa de Uva, a major grape festival in southern Brazil, when he touched a cluster of grapes mounted on a metal display that had become electrified. The decorative setup had been wired with small light bulbs, and investigators later said the lighting system was improperly grounded, allowing electrical current to pass into the metal structure supporting the grapes. When Martins made contact, he completed the circuit and received a 220-volt shock, knocking him to the ground and briefly rendering him unconscious as cameras continued rolling. The incident was treated as an accident tied to faulty wiring, not intentional tampering. Martins survived without lasting injuries and eventually led a successful career in politics. In October of 2016, Indiana father Jason Worley turned to Reddit for advice after discovering his wife Brandy had cheated on him with a neighbor, writing that he was struggling to cope and considering divorce. Just a few weeks later, after he told her he wanted to separate, Brandy woke up their children, 7-year-old Tyler and 3-year-old Charlie, and brought them into a room under the guise of a fun sleepover. During the early morning hours of November 17th, she fatally stabbed both children before attempting to take her own life. In a 911 call, she told dispatchers she did it because she didn't want her husband to have the kids if he left her. Investigators said the attack was planned, and in 2018, Brandy Worley was sentenced to 120 years in prison without parole. In 2006, the burned remains of an unidentified young woman were found along a Texas roadside, leaving her known only as Lavender Doe for years because of the purple clothing she was wearing. The case sat cold for years until an amateur sleuth began comparing online Jane Doe files and helped spark renewed attention that led to advanced DNA testing. In 2019, she was finally identified as Dana Lynn Todd, restoring her name after 13 years. In 2023, Joseph Burnett pleaded guilty to her murder and was sentenced to life in prison. 14-year-old Mexican girl Paloma Nicole Arellano died after undergoing cosmetic surgery that reportedly included breast augmentation and a Brazilian butt lift at a private clinic allegedly run by her mother's boyfriend. Authorities said she suffered severe complications following the procedure and was placed in a medically induced coma but died a few days later. Prosecutors later confirmed that the man accused of performing the procedure was arrested and charged in connection with her death, including allegations tied to practicing medicine without proper authorization.